Hi guys, welcome to another episode of A Student's Perspective. My name is Natalia Colasurdo and today I'm here with Elizabeth Ingram, who has had 25 years in the restaurant, bar, and residential design industry. I'm so excited to talk to you today and I can't wait to hear about everything. If you wouldn't mind giving yourself a little intro and then we can start off.
I'm Elizabeth Ingram, Elizabeth Ingram Studio. I have been working in the design field one way or the other for at least 25 years. I think about it now. I definitely have not taken the straight path, whatever that looks like. So, a little more unorthodox.
That's what we're here to talk about, how the unorthodox can kind of become a very successful career. What did you study in school and where did you go to school?
I went to Vanderbilt University initially, and at that time, you're looking back on it in high school. I didn't even know this is back in the 80s. So I graduated. I'm 54, so I graduated high school in 84. I'm sure there were design schools. I mean, of course there were. There was Parsons and Pratt and RISD and stuff, but it wasn't. I didn't even think of going to a small private girls' school in Boston. It was very liberal arts oriented. So it was like you were going to go to an English major or a history major and go on to be a lawyer or a doctor or whatever you were going to be. So the whole sort of like design, architecture, I don't mean there were 50 girls in my graduating class and none of them went to an art school of any kind. There were one or two women that went to like more of an art school, but they were like hardcore artists, like the artists that you were one in high school, but they were the art kids, right? And I was never really one of those. I did photography, and I knew that I probably always loved fashion in a way, without sort of being aware that it was because back then it wasn't like you didn't call yourself I'm a fashion girl or I'm now like a foodie or whatever, right? Like we have terms that we sort of self-identify now, and that just wasn't the thing. So I was just me, and if I looking back on it, I was always attracted to design and fashion and photography more.
Just in the arts in general.
Just the arts in general. I mean, sort of like that kind of thing. But I wasn't like, an art. I didn't go and sketch for hours or whatever. So I went off to Vanderbilt. And I had no idea what I was going to be. And I thought maybe I'd pick an English major. And I started taking art history classes. And I was like, oh, wait, I really love this. I'd grown up, my mother was a docent at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston. So I spent a lot of time around art. Anyway, so I was like, oh, I really like art history. And then with art histories, we did fine arts. It was a mixed degree. So we had to do fine arts as well as art history. And I really started to get into sort of, I didn't even know what it was called really, but sort of installation art. Like I started even photography class. Like I wouldn't do just like photos on the wall. I had like a chair in front of the photo that related to the photo, whatever. Like I started, again, looking back, hindsight, I was creating environments without even sort of knowing I was really doing that at the time. And then I graduated and I thought, well, I'm going to be a curator, something more academic, I guess. I'm going to be, something. I went and worked at the Contemporary Arts Center in Cincinnati and did as a receptionist. I mean, again, I put myself in the art world, but I wasn't like, that's what I'm going to do, design.
I feel like a lot of people are always at that point where they have all these interests like within the art industry, but they don't necessarily know what to do with it or what careers are actually out there.
Well, what's interesting, and I don't know what your program is like. I mean, I think Stephen told me that you, sorry, the text coming in. Your program does involve a lot of the arts, which is great. I think what's so different now for kids, for better or for worse, or say kids, I don't feel like a kid, but is that you can make a choice, but I'm going to be a designer and I'm going to go do off art school. And I did a thing at a very reputable very, very reputable thing, getting a talk a day visit at a very reputable art school here in Atlanta. I won't mention. And I was like, where's your material lab? Where are the drawing tables? Why doesn't it smell like paint? Like it was so cleaned up. Like the only department again that actually was like felt like you were immersing yourself in the product or the materiality of it was fashion. They were big fashion program. It was like, you know, you could actually text the things. And I was like, seriously, where is the material library for the interior designers? And they opened these cabinets. It was very neatly aligned, like a harem or novel, you know, booklets and stuff. And I was like, when do they get to like throw fabrics around, you know, and like, or whatever? Which I know design's not that, but that is part of it. I feel like, and I think drawing. I maintain too. Like, I've seen a lot of bad design come out of what I told are really good architects and designers because I don't think they draw anymore. I think they do it on computer and they don't actually walk through the spaces or experience. You know, when you mechanically draw something, I think you experience it at a more personal level than you do if you're sort of clicking buttons and.
Yeah, there's something to be said about that physical one-on-one experience with something.
Yeah,
materials.
There's, you know, and I understand, believe me, I know people that do SketchUp all the time for me, and I know how to do SketchUp, and I even started doing CAD, again, 30 years ago. So I graduated Vanderbilt, and I was like, well, now what do I do? And then this is not the answer you want to hear, I ended up marrying this guy, but I followed a guy out to the University of Idaho, of all places, because I was like, well, I'm going to go out west then. Wow. Idaho, okay, whatever. And I went off, and they had what I thought was going to be like this easy peasy architecture program. And that's what I entered first. And I was like, I got my ass. I mean, really? I was like, oh.
You saw differences between, I guess, yeah.
Oh my God. I mean, I walked in thinking, I'm going to Vanderbilt and I'm Northeastern and I'm bright and I'm going to tell you that no. I mean, my design was okay, but in terms of like workload and immersion and like, no, I did fine, but I mean, relatively speaking, I was like, this is much harder work than I thought, and I really enjoyed it immensely, and that's what I thought I was going to do, is be an architect, but I had to take an elective, and I couldn't get into, like, the normal classes. I hadn't picked early enough or something. Anyway, I'm taking, like, textile design. I was like, all right, whatever, here we go. You know, I'm going to walk through this, sleep through this class. Yeah. It was amazing. I was like, what? Like, and again, it was such a great school because they were very arts oriented, and you had to do a lot of art and stuff. And so we not only did we do textile design and learn about the academic side, but we made our own stuff. Like we wove our own stuff, and we, you know, like block printed, and we dyed, and we did all this other stuff. And I was like, for some reason, like I became so fascinated with that. So it sort of married. I don't know, something, maybe the fashion thing, you know, maybe.
Yeah, you were starting to connect all those different interests.
All those different things, exactly. So I worry a little bit about kids that get sort of thrust down this design, you know, and the programming for a lot of design is very like, you have to pre-pick out the art and you have to like, I mean, that's how the corporate world works, right? Like you have to sort of pre-design something a year before it ever even gets installed. Yeah. And it's like, where's the art in that? And I think it shows. I think we see a lot of anemic, sort of very corporate-looking, inhuman sort of design because of it. Anyway, so yeah, I went to Idaho, and then I went off to Portland, Oregon, and that was early '90s, like when the whole grunge thing was starting. So I was like kind of in Portland, ground zero, and all that was happening. But I was like, I want to be a designer. Who's going to hire me to design? I don't know how to do that. So I was like, I went and imported antiques. I landed this amazing job in North Calgary for the first 6 months I was there. And then I landed this amazing job where I managed, there's like 2 huge warehouses, like 30,000 square feet on this wonderful Portland's got this district called the Coral District, which is like Soho of the West, kind of, and it was pretty Soho at the time. We had to step over junkies to get into the building sometimes. Like it was rough at first. It is now pretty shishi. But and the guy hired me, and I managed that, and then I went and bought antiques for.
What did you get out of that experience?
Everything.
You probably must have saw so much. Must have seen so much coming in and out.
I went to Europe. I had a lot of experience in Europe already because I was lucky enough to travel a lot as a kid. But he shipped me off to Europe, and I bought antiques, and they taught me about the business side of things. I don't know. I don't know. It solidified a lot of stuff for me. It really informed a lot of what, and I can't exactly tell you how, but the business side of things, but also like having just exposure to so many. I think travel is like the number one thing. If you can't go to school, travel. You know, I mean, nobody says what design school did you go to, because you're not going to design my restaurant unless you went to Pratt. I'm sorry, they're not going to. You know, what does your work look like is what's going to. Anyway, so that exposed me to so much, and I can't exactly tell you how, but I think the travel, the exposure of
you probably meeting so much, those conversations you were having with all those people you were meeting,
all of that, all the museums, and all of just immersing myself in that world. And then the film industry, it was Donna filmed a movie there, and Gus Van Sant did a bunch of movies there because he's from there. And I went to party with Keanu and River Phoenix during the, it was like a town, still is a town, frankly, but they kind of rented a bunch of stuff from us. Like we were the opera rented from us. We had 30,000 square feet of really antiques and stuff. So like, wow, it was a European. So I got to kind of know some set decorators, and they were like, well, do you want to just come out to the set someday and like, you know, hang out? So, sure. And again, it was like very professional, but it wasn't Hollywood professional. It was still the Portland version of professional, even though these were all LA people. But and I just sort of learned a little bit from them. I didn't start doing it so much, but I learned from them, just being, again, sort of immersing myself in that world. And then I left there after 10 years, and a guy hired me away who his name was Michael Sizz from Art Metropolis, which is this. He actually died a couple of years ago. Liver cancer, pretty young. But and I worked with him for a year. He was a very interesting person to work for. But he was Lenny Kravitz's good friend. He and Lenny Kravitz used to come in as you could like so stoned into the antique place and like trip around. Anyway, Michael hired me, and I worked with did some like W hotels and whiskey bars and stuff for him. And I had never actually done that professional stuff before, but so that's another trial by fire, right? And Michael, to his credit, he was amazing. Michael wasn't just like, make it pretty. He was like, no, we're going to learn how to vacuum form this acrylic, and I need you to find someone who can vacuum form acrylic. And you know, that was like, the internet was a very young thing at that time, relatively speaking. So you like trying to work with these people in like rural Illinois to like, you know, that normally make airplanes to like vacuum form acrylic mirrors, stuff like that. Like
that itself was probably was a learning curve.
Oh my god! I mean, yeah, unbelievable. And then I don't know. After about a year of that, I was like, okay, I think I'm that's enough now. Like, you know, 80-hour work weeks and very intense environment and stuff. So
at what points do people, I guess, know that they've kind of outgrown a place and that it's time to move on?
Yeah, you just know. I mean, you're just like, time to go.
You really gotta listen to yours.
That was such an intense experience. I was like, I need to back off of that for a minute. But I don't know, design just kept finding me. I moved, this is like so not what you probably want your people to hear, because I literally did not take that. I went and worked at a ski resort after that, for God's sakes, in Oregon, and Mount Hood, and they were like, they liked my house. My husband and I bought a house, and this little like shack, and people started to see my house. They were like, do you want to do the restaurant? Do you want to do the ski shop? Do you want to do? And I was like, I guess, yeah, sure, okay. You know, so I like got back into it that way, and then I moved to. It just kept finding me. I don't know. We moved from there to Tennessee, of all places, Chattanooga.
You say that, but I feel like it's always was and is still inside of you. So it was kind of always just popping up like in your life. Yeah, it was just always there.
It kept finding me. I mean, I'm spiritual, whatever. Like it just, yeah. And so I did a bunch of design, and believe it or not, Chattanooga, Tennessee. There's a lot of money in Chattanooga. Coca-Cola was invented there. So I did a lot of really high-end residential, With a guy I did own a beautiful shop called Revival, and he used to be a stylist for Ralph Lauren in New York for years. Anyway, there I got a job with a guy because I was like, I got to get out of Chattanooga, it's a small town, and a guy here named Mark Sage owns a company called Bobo Intriguing Objects, who also imports stuff from Belgium and Poland, etc. I had a really great partner in Europe, and Restoration Hardware basically didn't buy them, but used them a lot for their stuff. So I worked with Restoration Hardware really closely, doing product development with him, and then and designed all his upholstery, and Restoration picked up some pieces. And he had a huge building in High Point, and then warehouse. All the shows. Aren't you been able to go to the shows? Not now, but like High Point, North Carolina, and
yes, our school actually showcases at High Point in North Carolina.
Okay, yeah. So you've been. It's crazy.
I've been a couple of times. It is crazy. It's quite the experience. Talk about overwhelming. Very overwhelming.
It's totally international. Like everyone's descending on this little tiny town, and there's like barely even a hotel to stay. Like it's insane. Anyway,
it is.
So I did his showrooms for several years, like 4 or 5 or 6 years, and it would be like 7 containers of antiques coming in. And it would be like, okay, well, I remember a couple of times it was like the last container would come in literally 2 days before we opened. And it was 4 floors of furniture and others and lighting. And I had to anyway, I was very proud because people would line up outside the door to come buy some, because he had great, great, great stuff, still does. And people would be like, it's such a journey. It's a magical journey you've taken me on. Like, oh my God, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, wow. But that was, again,
all that feedback from the initial, you were kind of doing your thing and people were reacting to it. I feel like it shocked you in a way that you weren't really prepared for.
It's sort of like a street performer. You're like, I think I can play guitar, and you have like 80 people sitting around being like, oh my God, make an album. You're like, oh, okay. So I think also, do you have charrettes still? Do you know does that word mean anything to you?
Charrettes?
So
No.
charrette used to be, I don't know why we don't still do that, schools don't do that, but you would be given a design problem and you'd have to solve it within 24 hours or 8 hours. If you lock yourself in, it's kind of daunting, but it's really you usually do with a group, right? So it's quick, design a restaurant in 8 hours. You know what I mean? And you have to present. And thinking on your toes, even though the design world doesn't really, again, we're talking about, right? Like I said, a lot of people pre-design a year out, but it does sort of hone your skills in terms of having to sort of think intuitively and problem solving and understanding because I think at a certain level, most or many people that are good at design have an intuitive sense. They can, I can explain to you why I made the choices I made in certain places, but I can more back into that than I can say okay, now I'm going to go find this geometric fabric or something, whatever, because it's going to work with this chair. I know I'm doing it, but it's sometimes until I see what I've done that I can put it all together as to why I've done it. So I think things like charrettes, they sort of hone your ability to access the information that you need relatively quickly. And I think starting to trust your intuition is very important, because you do have to make, anyone, you can pre-design anything, but you have to make a lot of decisions on the fly in any design project. This fabric's not available, that chair is not available.
You're constantly always thinking of, we are designing for people, so I feel like we're constantly trying to solve those problems, trying to overcome those things to kind of get to that end goal. If that chair is sold out, what are you doing for your client or your customer that might help them?
Your design, it's what's the right thing to do, and so it's sort of, I think. Anyway, so I called these month-long or several week-long exercises that I'd have to do, an extended charrette, as it were, because I literally would have to we'd unload the container, unwrap the container, and then I'd have 40. So a container's 40 linear, is it called a 40 high cube or a box. 40 feet worth in height. I show you photos, literally furniture stacked to the ceiling in a huge warehouse space, and having to like pick through what everything is and then decide relatively actually very quickly. That goes upstairs, that stays down here, that goes over here, that goes over there, that light goes there, let's do this big thing here, let's do that, let's do that. It's like it was like 30 days of that, like nonstop, and not knowing what you were getting. Like
Do you consider yourself a pretty like fast-paced worker?
Yes, I work better that way actually. Anyway, so and then Ford Fry came and saw my showroom up in North Carolina, and he was like, come to my restaurants. And I'd done restaurants in Chattanooga, and I'd done restaurants with the Artropolis guy, with the whiskey bar, I'd done bars.
What attracted you to, I know you said that these things kind of find you, but do you recall anything from your past now, looking back, of like how in tune you are with at least restaurant design and entertainment and bars? Do you think there's a reason for that?
Yeah, they're more dramatic. You know, you can make more of an impact. I mean, most people with restaurant design, residential design, are like, I want it to be serene, I want it to be comfortable,
minimal. Yeah.
I'm like, I can do that,
but I can also.
It's not much fun, and also like thousands of people aren't going to get to see it, by the way. So, and I do. I mean, and this is a very salient conversation right now. It's like, restaurants were gathering places, and they were the community spots, and I think they were so important for people to be able to be taken out of their
experience.
Food as an experience. Exactly, and my work is pretty immersive.
How do you use interior elements, such as you have your upholstery, you have your lighting, you have your furniture? How do you use those elements to your advantage when you're designing a space?
You mean my line, or just in general? Like
in general, if you're going to design a space, in general.
Well, you got to figure out where you're going to spend your money, because it's very rare, and Roman Williams and other people are like, oh, spend all the money in the world. Most people aren't like that. So it's like, okay, where do I spend my money? Where do I have my impact? And again, that's the thing about restaurants, you need to have impact, I think. Every space is a little bit different. I would say probably lighting is where you would spend most of your money.
Yeah.
Honestly, because lighting tends to be a little bit more expensive, and everyone can see it, and it's lighting is also so important. I mean, bad lighting can go in a restaurant, because if someone doesn't feel pretty or sexy or attractive in a restaurant, they're not going to want to go, even if they don't know. Not saying I'm not pretty in that restaurant, I don't want to go there. They may not know that's why they don't want to. An older woman, let me tell you, lighting is like, that's why I put brass on a lot of tables. I'm like, the light kicks back up and makes me look good.
Very interesting to know. I guess another question to that was, I know us as designers, we have to be very in tune with our senses. What would you say is the most powerful sense when designing? Do you take that into consideration? Like you said, the lighting. So would that be sight? Do you find that as the most powerful?
Oh, definitely.
The touch or the...
Well, tactile. If you can afford tactile, that's great. I did a bar, a restaurant last year called Banshee, and they had no money. And I was like, okay, we're going to do plywood tables and like literally the most basic banquet, not even like benches, steel and plywood benches. And got like minimal, I pop here, pop there, did a little stencil thing. But I was like, one place I do, because they were going into a relatively, not a low income neighborhood, but like a protection my neighborhood at the time, artsy kind of funky neighborhood. And I was like, one place I really want you to explore, which is going to be a surprise for people, is to do this beautiful leather on this banquet. And we did like cushions, they're not like, it's not like hard, it's like leather pads, and it's the most beautiful. And I'm like, it's going to wear beautifully, and it's going to be this surprise, because people are sitting at this plywood table. We've left a lot of the interiors, but when they sit, and not everybody gets to sit the banquette, obviously, but there's that moment when they touch the leather and they're like, oh. And it's just a bit of a surprise. It's just this little element.
Yeah.
Like, I did not, given everything else around me, I did not expect that. And I think that's important. I think that keeps people like wanting to come back to sort of
it's those little details that are kind of more impactful.
Yeah, and if you look at it, you're like, why would you plywood tables? Why would you spend all the money on the leather? I'm like, because I still stand by like a hard
switching that notion of what it was or what it was supposed to be.
Exactly. It tells a very, it's like music. It's like one note can change a lot of things. Like, oh, that just became a sad song. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So, and I think that's important for people, especially people wanting to return. Like, it's important to me to want to keep people exploring. Like, I can't maybe, again, put a finger on why something is like, that's, I want to go back because I want to stay at those tables next time.
That can be said again also for looking at art, because with your art background, you want to keep the viewer's eyes on the piece. You're all about the movement of where what is it first drawing, what is first drawing your eye to it, and then what is keeping your eyes there.
If you walk in and you get it in one, it's just bad. You're like, okay, I already know what the experience is going to be. And again, like, we're trained to know that, but those that aren't, they can intuit it. They can feel that too. Maybe some don't care, and that's fine. But if you're especially talking about finer dining or you ask people to spend money, and you need people to come back too, right? For your client, you're like, you don't want people to go once and be like, had the experience. It's like, no, I need to make every table as much as possible. There's always a crappy table, but every table to be like, at least really think about what people are looking at.
Kind of, again, thinking about that end user experience, making sure that everyone who's going to be involved in that space, wherever they are placed, if it even is at a worse table, how are you making them feel important? How are you
make them want to come back at least and be like, get a better table, but not ruin the experience. But the other thing that I do, I always do a playlist. Like, music is so important to me. I had a client last year, which I liked the restaurant. It's fine. It ended up being kind of a B for me, just budget. I just got VE, called VE, value engineered down and down and down and down. So finishes. But like, so the playlist, I go in there now and it sounds like, I can tell like a 35-year-old guy made a playlist. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna name the bands that are on there. I'm like, dude, it totally tells a very different story. If you, I think like every restaurant, if there was only like one soundtrack that every restaurant in the entire world can play, it should be like jazz at least. Like, just because it's kind of neutral to everybody. You know what I mean? Like, but not that you want it to be neutral. I can definitely know. I mean, it's important. So I always make playlists when I'm designing a place, and that is so much a part of the experience to me as well. Huge.
Yeah,
like a soundtrack for a movie. I mean, like Wes Anderson movies. I don't know if you watch Wes Anderson movies, but like so much of his storytelling is the soundtrack.
And so, again, just to like reiterate the fact that we are talking about all the different arts and how they're so connected. This is such an multifaceted industry that culminates all of it.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to touch on, people have described your work as timeless. And looking at some pieces, even your furniture pieces, I can attest to that. How would you say this is true? Do you agree? And so...
And it kills me it's like, I don't even look at design magazines. I'm like, color trend of the year. I'm like, I don't what? Okay, I'm going to use that color, and then you're going to be like, oh, she did that to 2020. That's so 2020. And it's not that, some color should be in date or out of date, but like the fact that we even think that way.
Yeah.
The fact that like, really? Like, I'm going to go look and see what the color trend is, and I'm going to paint it that color because they told me to paint it that color? Like, that's work to me.
That shouldn't be.
I think part of the timelessness is a storytelling aspect, is that, I would love if someone came, well, actually, I'm doing one now. It's kind of modern, and actually excited about that. But because I get kind of pigeonholed. I mean, I just did the lake house for ourselves, and it's really pretty modern and stripped down. I can do that, and I like to do that. But at least we're doing restaurants. I think the storytelling aspect. I don't really think about why that makes that timeless.
Like when you're designing, do you find it important to look to the past in order to design?
Absolutely, every time. So I literally will make up a story, and I think what I try to do, because to me, the most interesting people, the most interesting places. I mean, there's a reason we go back. We all get on planes. We used to get on planes and fly to Italy, right? And like trip over cobblestones and sit cheek to jowl at restaurants and have terrible plumbing or whatever, and then look at old buildings, and then there's like really modern stuff too. Like the really interesting places in this world have this collected
narrative.
Collective experiences, collective narratives. Like, we can all go to like the historic home of Jefferson. And it's like, and this is the year that we're going to stop there. And it's like, but the most interesting places that I think all of us grew up in is like when different generations bring in different things, right? Like everyone loves mid-century modern. I love mid-century modern. And I have done a couple of restaurants that are like, this is this year. But
I'm a sucker for mid-century modern.
Huh?
I'm a sucker for mid-century modern.
Yeah, I mean, we all are, but it's like, it's such a distinct time period that it doesn't allow for any room around it, like breathing space. Like, it's such a time capsule thing, which is fun. Like Mad Men was great. If you look at Mad Men's set, it wasn't like, okay, this is the year this one's 1962, and that piece of furniture is from 62. I mean, if you really looked around, like they had some other pieces that were still left over from the 40s or whatever. I mean, that's how we all really live, right? Like, we don't buy whole new wardrobes every single spring or winter, right? Like, we have our annual sweater that we wear that's timeless, classic, right? Like, that goes with everything. And I think that spaces are kind of the same way. Black is always in fashion. Oatmeal's always in fashion. Like, do I have my mustard shirt? Sure I do. But, like, I think space is the same way, that they feel more authentic if they feel collective, if they don't feel like everything was built or done specifically for this. I always end up trying to like imbue with vintage stuff. Like I think probably the most completely immersive restaurant, Marcel, to think about it. I try not to do that, but like Beetle Cat probably is my most of an era in a way, especially the Den. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. It's the 70s one. Beetle Cat, the Den. It's the bar. Very 70s.
Okay, very 70s.
Website, very 70s. But it's like mostly what I do. Well, even for Beetle Cat, so I tell myself a story. I always have a narrative of like some kind in terms of that there's a collective history of some kind. Sorry, it's my little dog. So I think the timelessness comes from not being like stuck in a certain time period. I try to bring in elements from different time periods and still giving a very strong sort of like view point, but most of them I try to sort of bring in different elements so you're not really exactly sure what the time period is. And again, people's houses.
And again, I think that keeps them guessing. It keeps them wondering, what style is this exactly? You're keeping them engaged that way. Yeah. I love the Golden Eagle project.
Yeah. So Golden Eagle is actually pretty immersive too in terms of the time period in a way. I benefited greatly from that building, which is at a long axis, so you get like good axis views, and the ceiling is great. But the owner, and I literally dumpster dove for some of the furniture in there, quite literally, and then had it like rebuilt.
That's awesome.
On it. That was an example of someone who did not have a big budget at all. And I asked him to splurge on a couple of things I think made a difference. So that that's lighting and stuff.
Yeah, it's very moody.
It is storytelling. It's sort of like it is. That's what goes back to sort of the set design, like telling a story through a set. Basically, I mean, to me, restaurants are set pieces, like a movie set. You're in a play, as it were, and people want that, literally that drama. If you think about it like a play or a movie. Homes again, less so. I mean, homes are fun because a lot of residential projects get super expensive. Sorry, that's my puppy.
It's okay.
She makes terrible sounds. You get to use super expensive fabrics and stuff in residence. Like, go to the design center. Yeah, have you been to ADAC? Have you come through ADAC at all, or any of the design centers?
No, not ADAC.
It's like where designers go to buy like all their super expensive fabrics and things like that, and you get to touch and feel everything, and lighting and furniture and stuff. So residences are fun because sometimes you get to use those, and that's really great. But
what was your, like, I guess, jumping off point where you wanted to start your own studio? What point did you knew that you wanted to kind of take this on yourself? Was it the fact that people were telling you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't think that everyone is designed to be an entrepreneur or a business owner necessarily. But when I turned 50, it was like, all right, I need to do this thing. Hey, sorry.
Sorry.
Please stop. My studio / apartment in town. Kid is here. Granny. It just was time. It was time for me to try. And most everyone I worked with, because you work with a lot of different, here's a bit of advice. You work with a lot of different, especially for restaurants and even in homes, like craftspeople, people like woodworkers and steel workers and lighting people and stuff. And it's like, almost all of those people, all of them they have their own businesses, right? So,
how could you kind of put it all together? You had all those information, you had all those outlets.
Exactly. So I had to, like, a guild as it were. It's very important, and I will give this advice. When the people that I work with, I've worked with them now for quite a while, and we have really good relationships, is you have to respect them. Like, you can learn so much from them. You can be like, I want my couch to be this way. This is how my sofa is going to look, or this is how this is going to look. This is how this countertop's going to look. What are your thoughts on how to reach that, or do you have anything that you could think about doing better? Because I've learned like shortcuts, but like things I didn't know about, and I know that there are designers who walk in, they're like, this is how this is, and I do. I know in the end result like what I want it to look like.
I think there's something to be said that
learning from other people is really smart because they're the experts in what I know what I want it to look like, and I'm dangerous. I know enough to be dangerous about how it should be built, but I don't do the building. You know what I mean? So
yes, you know what you know, and you don't try and claim more than you know. I think that's very important for somebody to know that, like
respecting other people, respecting people's. Because a lot of designers, I do see this. They come in and they think it's a huge job. Don't get me wrong. Thousands of decisions. If you really think about everything you have to decide, there are thousands of decisions that go into any design job. Thousands. So overall, you do need to have, keep really strong to your narrative.
I think that's by setting that narrative in the beginning, it will help you make those nitty gritty little tiny decisions.
Everything needs to tie back, and that's why. I literally will write a narrative about a place. And because of the thousands of decisions have to be made, and a lot of them on the fly, it's like, does this decision tie back to my original narrative? Can I make sense with that? Or if you're, if it's something like a chair is not available, okay, that I was relying on that chair. What other chair could feasibly make sense with this narrative? Even if I have to tweak the narrative a little bit to make it sense. It's like writing an outline for a paper. I don't know if you have to do that or not before, but like you write an outline for a long paper, they have to kind of tie back to the outline. Yeah. So anyway, it was just time for me to try to do my own thing. And I came like the Fort Fry company, or Rocket Farm Restaurant, what it's called now. Very corporate, environment, and great. I mean, it needs to be. They've got like 1,500 employees, but
how do you describe the environment in your studio?
Loose and free and wild and very, very small. I've had to make a decision. Like, this is the problem about being a designer. I'm trying to still figure out the economics of it, to be frank with you. I've got a friend here who's a designer in town who's really good, but he's got like 12 to 15 employees at all times. And it's like, he can do a lot more projects than I can at any given time. Absolutely. But he also doesn't have like the immediate connection with all of them because he's got to, like parcel out the work to people, and he relies, and I rely heavily on my one or two assistants.
There's something to be said about that close knit, that more integrated design approach,
Well, absolutely, because again, what it ends up being, and maybe over-aggrandizing it, but it ends up being, and it's been described as this more of an art installation. What I do is more of an art installation than it is. I mean, they are design and they do function and they have to function. And I do always think that with restaurants, like I meet all my restaurant designer friends, whatever, dumb friends, restaurant clients, and they hire me back over and over. But like, you have to respect them too, right? You're not going to come in. I know other designers too are like, nope, I'm sorry, the host stand can't be there because blah, blah, blah. And I'll have a conversation about that. Like, well, I prefer it's here, but I mean, restaurants got to work. If it doesn't work, they can't serve people properly or whatever. So mine is very, I try to be respectful. I do lean heavily on my assistants for a lot of the clerical stuff.
Yeah, trying to keep an open mind.
Huh?
Trying to keep an open mind, I guess. Even just listening to somebody else's opinion can help.
Like, what are your thoughts? What are your ideas? But you do have to be careful with that too, because ultimately your name is on the door. I mean, actually, when I first started my company, I didn't want to call it Elizabeth Ingram Studio. I wanted to call it Pistol. But I had my PR person at the time, who I don't have a PR person anymore, but he was like, you're already in the press with your name. Like, your name is already out there because, like, so that's sort of, you need to, have your name.
Right.
And unfortunately, there are a couple of restaurants where it was like, their PR people kind of ran out very early and were like, this is being designed by Elizabeth Ingram Studio because they wanted press. And I was like, okay, well, now you have to do exactly what I say, more or less, because you just put my name out there. Literally, my name is on it. So I do keep it on. I mean, it's an open environment, but like ultimately,
the balance, like to make sure
does come back to my
connecting your.
Yeah, having children, I guess. It's like you want to be respectful, you want them to express themselves, and sometimes they're really right, but ultimately it has to come back to what my initial sort of vision is on it.
So I know you ventured into furniture design as well as lighting. How would you describe your aesthetic? Would it be, because I know when you're designing restaurants it's different, but how would you describe your aesthetic when you went to go design your furniture pieces?
There's definitely
a certain vision you had in mind, or?
Well, I love, again, like tactile. I think tactile qualities are great. Sculptural. My pieces, they're statement pieces in a way, but they do function. I mean, I live with them every day, and with my husband, and they've been great. But I decided to keep it. I need to do a few more pieces. That kind of came about very quickly. I'd already, had so many. I'd already done product design, restoration, and BOGO. I knew how to do that. I knew how to work with. And then also, when you do even residences or restaurants, you do a lot of custom, as it were. You call it that because can't always find what you need, and scale is really important. Restoration hardware is probably not going to have the exact size sofa you need or whatever it is. But I came out the gate, and again, my PR person was like, "I don't have any. You don't have a restaurant that I can sell right now." So I just started doing Golden Eagle, and it was going to be like 8 months before it came out and or opened. And he was like, "What you got?" And I was like, "Well, I've got this furniture in my head, and I've been drawing, and so." But it was literally like all I could muster was like 5 pieces. I had to work with, the California at the time was where my made, and others was made in Birmingham and in Atlanta. But so I kept it small, but each piece, because I'm not going to do furniture mobile, and it was so honestly, it was more of a PR stunt initially, but I mean, it's something that I do, and again, I continue to do multiple custom pieces that aren't in my line.
Yeah, I think it just shows again like how much more you can offer.
Yeah, I mean,
adding to
we all do it. You know, I mean, if you're which is not to say that I don't order lights from West Elm. Sometimes the budget doesn't allow. Like, you try to blend the West Elm sconces with the custom chandeliers. That you definitely do that. But so I guess my pieces are, timeless, but they are rooted in certain time periods. I guess. I mean, a chair is not a chair. It's a chair. But I mean,
it's those little decisions, like what material you use or what.
Yeah, exactly. So
measurements that make that difference.
There tend to be more sculptural pieces or statement pieces in a way. Again, because I had to sort of make a splash initially, and very customizable. So for designers, like if they want gray concrete as opposed to white, or steel as opposed to brass, or that kind of thing.
Is there a certain, material palette that you would stick to when using furniture, or are you kind of open-minded to using anything?
It's like I did these swivel chairs initially that I show in like a gray velvet, because that's what I have. And then for Alton, when he was still just a client, I did him in like this like Maharan pebble, like acidy kind of yellow. Okay. They still look great. So I mean, upholstery, and the sofa is blue, whereas again I show it in gray. But I mean, in terms of I don't know. I don't have really a palette. I tack the tactile nature of things. Like I just did a lake house for us, and like everything's plywood again, and everything is steel and plywood and concrete.
Yeah. Tactile can be an aesthetic. I feel like just leaving it at that, and then the rest is kind of up to your.
Right.
Would you prefer to kind of see a space before you would design a furniture piece for it, or would you kind of like to work freely and then see how it can work in space?
That's a good question.
There's something to be said about both, I guess.
It goes both ways. I mean, I don't feel like I've got to design a space around the sofa necessarily. Although I may have just, maybe sometimes I do. Sometimes the shape of the sofa is everything in the room. So I think it does go both ways. It depends on what else the room has to offer, put it that way.
Awesome. One last question for you. Can you tell me, I guess, the most important factors, I guess, that you think about when you first start designing a restaurant? What are like the top 5 most important things to keep in mind? A couple little tips. As someone who is interested in furniture design, a restaurant design.
Let me think about this. I really start with a story. I really do start with a story. So I'll go to the space. The space is important. Okay. And there's a restaurant. It's a cafe. It's on my website. It's called Porcelain. I didn't have any photos taken of it yet. It's in Queens, New York. Mm-hmm. I had done a bar in New York and here's Joy Face is another one. I'd done a bar called Joy Face in New York. It's super well received. And the guy in both cases, actually, I'll do Joy Face instead. The guy was like, "Hey, I've got no money, I have no time, and I've got a bar." I was like, "We have an apartment in New York. I'm going to be there anyway. Sure, I like to do a bar in New York. Why not?" I like the challenge, and I liked him, and we had a really good rapport. He actually reached out to me via Instagram, which I was like, "Okay." And we ended up like whatever direct messaging for a minute, and then like just talking about. And I went to go visit the space, and I was like, "Wow, okay." It was a 1940s sort of very basic space. There was nothing architecturally interesting at all. Lighting wasn't great. I mean, the light like coming in wasn't great. The outside, it was East Village, but it wasn't like it was like it was an apartment building above.
No defining characters.
Nothing defining at all. Long, skinny space, like the stage thing at the far end. Just like, what have I gotten myself into? And I started thinking about it, and I was like, we gotta smoke and mirror this thing. We gotta smoke and mirror this. Meaning like, I've got nothing. This is telling me nothing. Like I've got nothing to lean on here, other than I couldn't move the plumbing. It means the bar had to be where the bar had to be. And he was like, I don't know, it's just going to be a bar. Like, do you have any kind of story? Do you have any kind of, like, Golden Eagle guy was like, I love old motor lodges. It's like, great, that gives me something to, jump on. Or it's Chinese restaurants, like, it's a Chinese restaurant. Like, okay. Or Marcel's French Steakhouse. Easy enough. This guy's like, I don't know, I just want a bar. I'm like, just a bar. He's like, yeah, we're not going to have, like, major cocktails. It's not going to be, like, shishi drinks. It's just going to be a bar. I'm like, I'm going to serve, like, bud, and like, what am I doing? What the hell have I actually done here? And the more I thought about it, I was like, all right, what do I, digging back into my own past, I was like, what? Okay, this is a residential building. It's in what formerly was a really shitty part of town, pardon my French, a really bad part of town, with a really seedy background. East Village used to be just like bad. Really bad. And so I just sort of be like, okay, what? I don't have anything architectural to work with. What am I going to work with here? I'm going to work with the story of the neighborhood. That's what I got to work with here. And again, he had no budget, he had no money. So I was like, all right. So
yeah, we tend to forget what to draw inspiration from, and it ends up being right in front of us.
It's right in a way. So I was like, all right, searching. So I was like, all right, what's the history of the neighborhood? I know this is what I know. So I was like, okay. And I called it Red Bar first. I've been to Japan, been to Tokyo several times. There's this little bar in Tokyo called Red Bar, which is literally like, it's painted red and a bunch of crappy chandeliers hanging there. So I was like, maybe we'll do the Red Bar thing. Maybe I'll just do, sorry.
That's okay.
My phone just came in. Anyway, and I was like, I guess we're just going to hang a bunch of chandeliers. And he's like, well, I can't have the budget to do all the electrical stuff. And I was like, okay, let me think about this. So I was like, you know what? Here's the basic idea. And he's like, my contractor starting tomorrow. I'm like, go buy the cheapest paneling you can. And I had remembered back to my, I had a friend, this is probably going on too long for you, but I had a friend whose parents had this funeral home, believe it or not, in the north end of Boston growing up. And it was like, her family lived above this funeral home. This funeral home was like, it looked like their living room. As bizarre as it weird. I'm sorry, I know that seems strange, but I was like, and it always intrigued me as a kid. I was like, it looks like a living room, but it's a funeral home, but I don't get it. You know what I mean? Like, and it was, anyway. And then I started thinking about like private drinking clubs. We had been to like a friend in New York, like a private drinking club, very shishi on the upper east side, whatever. I was like, private drinking clubs. Wow, okay, maybe that would have been such a thing. This probably would have been a thing in the 40s because this building built in the 40s. So I was like, okay, wait a minute. Let's make it look like it was a private drinking club in the 40s. Like, but maybe we'll find 40s stuff. It hadn't quite settled yet, but I was like, it needs to look like it's been here for a really long time without being like really vintage. And I knew he didn't have any money. I was like, here, just clad everything in this like bad paneling and we'll make it look like this, we'll just do like random furnishings. And again, the guy didn't have like a big program he wanted to do. So I was like, I'm literally inventing this as I go. And he was like, okay. So he starts, and I was like, rug. We need a carpet in here. It needs to be dark. And I've said this in a story before. I was like, I never thought, I hate the color burgundy. I hate it. And I was like, I'll never use the color burgundy. And I was like, I think it needs to be burgundy. I was like, freaking thing.
Well, it's making that narrative in your head has
exactly. So
made that decision for you.
Right there, absolutely. And we went vintage shopping. He did some like pre-work for me. We went to vintage shopping, and they had a ton of 70s stuff. And I'd already done Beetle panels. I don't do 70s again. But it's kind of what we had to buy. So I was like, okay, the story just changed a little bit. Here's the story. The story is, it was a private drinking club in the 40s. which just looked like someone's living room. Again, taking from the funeral parlor thing, which for some reason, I think the size and the shape of the room sort of made me go there. And there was a stage at the other end, and I remember like there was a platform where the bodies would be.
Yeah.
Very different style though. It was like this bad Italian looking funeral home. But anyway, and like plastic seat covers on the bazaar.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I was like, okay, it was a private drinking club in the 40s. And it's like this totally just came to me. I was like, but it closed when it got bad. And the guy that started it in the 40s, his grandson, who was a ne'er-do-well, didn't have a place to stay and started sleeping in the bar and started doing porn movies, like bad porn movies. Because that's how people, like in the 70s, there was a lot of like illicit porn done, like stolen. So I was like, so it's like a 70s, like it's his place. And I was like, you got to put a waterbed in here. He's like, ha ha ha. But no, you got to put a waterbed in here. Sure as shit, they put a waterbed in here. I mean, it's literally 3-hour lines to get in this little bar in East Village now. And it's like they play nothing but disco music. It's all just vintage, like crappy furniture. It's a rug. It's like a carpet, like a bad commercial carpet on the floor. It's like, you can look at the photos of it. We went and found like the whole thing with the, and I do this thing like cluster stuff, which is what I used to do in the showrooms at Bobo. It's like we went and bought like the worst like 70s and 80s like things would hang over like breakfast dining tables, you know, like bad ones. We clustered them all together as one thing.
Yeah.
And it was like, and again, we had a narrative, and
you just kept going with it. You just couldn't stop at that point.
Exactly. So it was like, there's the narrative, and I was like, and the bartenders need to wear bathrobe, like bad velour bathrobes when they're behind the bar. Like this is their place, and there's the waterbed. And initially we were going to do like, I was going to turn the waterbed a certain way in the window, and then like they were going to do like a nightly setup, like someone actually is sleeping there, and then people would walk by and be like, oh, like there's today's paper, and you know, still in the kind of develop like an art installation thing. That didn't pan out. I had to turn the other way, which is totally fine. But it's like it again
grew into
like,
something.
I just walked the bar, yeah, and it turned into like
you gave it a life that it didn't have.
Justin Timberlake goes and hangs out there. Like Charlie XCX goes and hangs out there. Like all these things turning into kind of a pride. The owners are not gay; it's a guy and a girl, but they like turn into this pride place, right? Because they love disco.
Yeah. And
it literally turns into, and this was supposed to be, it's a fucking house party. Pardon my French again, but like their tagline was Joyface having people over every night, and that's what it is. It feels like a house party, like someone's parents are away. You know what I mean?
Great.
In the basement of the 70s. And it was all luck. But it's like I gave myself a narrative and we adhered to that narrative. And it was
full-heartedly. It's something about like going into it.
It had the 40s thing. It had the whole thing. We had vintage Playboys. I introduced them to Wii magazine from 70s and 80s, and they ordered like all the vintage Wiis and Playboys for like no money, and they're all. I was like, oh, the millennials are going to kill me on this with the Me Too movement. They loved it.
Wow,
they loved it. I mean, it was just like, but I think it's because we gave them such a strong story, and it was totally just like
there's no questioning something that has so much detail.
Right,
something that goes full-fledged. You can't really question it if it's such a
Exactly. And they've immersed themselves in spades. And, you know, it also gave the owners, who are still a good friend of mine, but like, you know, if they didn't want to make every decision by calling me and be like, what do the matchbooks look like? Because that still happens too, is this other guy in New York too, like calls me on everything. And I'm like, you know the story. You know what I mean? Like, I trust you. And they'll be like, I bought this. What do you think? I'm like, perfect. You got it. You know, like, so they're training themselves to solve for themselves too, like to keep that alive. So that's very long answer to your question.
No, I'm so glad. No, it's all about taking people on that journey, you know, with you. Whether once you're done designing a space, once they go into it, you might have designed it 10 years ago, but they're experiencing that narrative for the first time. You're bringing them through that journey for the first time.
So be resolute in where that story is. Don't wishy-washy on the story. I mean, you have to be flexible because life will throw you. Mm-hmm. I didn't plan the 70s thing, but I was like, oh, when I saw the furniture, some of the furniture, I was like, wait a minute, wait, here it comes. Here's the story now. It's not like one note with a 40s thing. Now it's like, and we give it a more depth, you know?
That's awesome.
So tell yourself a story, stick to the narrative.
That's great.
keep going back to that.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a great talk. I wish we can continue talking more and more. I'm sure we could. But if you can just let the people watching where they can reach you and your work, either a website or maybe an Instagram handle that you can refer them to.
Elizabeth Ingram Studio and www.elizabethingram.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It's been a great pleasure talking
Absolutely.
with you.
Good luck in your endeavors.
Thank you. This has been another episode of A Student's Perspective.
Bye.